تذكر يوما كنت تعانق دمعة الفكر تناجي الله في صبر وترجو رحمة تسري فعاش القلب إخلاصا وصرت تحوم كالطير تحلق في ثقافات وتنهل من ربى الخير ترى ما زلت تذكرها وتذكر روعة.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وأصحابه وبارك وسلم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. A simple but a universally embracing message which basically means may the peace and blessings of the Almighty our Creator descend upon each and every one. Welcome to another edition of Sunday Forum broadcast from the studios here at the Quds complex in Gatesville, Cape Town, South Africa. The Sunday Forum, what is it all about? Interesting topics, current topics, thought-provoking topics, tackling the issues of the day as we unpack, engage, agree, and sometimes even agree to disagree. What do we have on the program today? Again, two topics. One, focusing on the elderly and how they manage some diseases. And secondly, the story of triumph over adversity by an amazing young man. Once again, we have assembled two very interesting persons to discuss all these issues. So first, human beings all get sick from time to time, but it's the aged who find it very difficult to overcome illness physically, psychologically, as well as emotionally. And today, we are going to be discussing three conditions which inflict essentially the elderly people, and we hope to be able to learn from the learned person that's in the studio today. So without any further ado, it's an absolute pleasure, an honor, and a privilege to have Dr. Uzair Amin in the studios. Dr. Saab, assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much. I beg your pardon, go ahead. Thank you so much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Dr. Uzair Amin, of course, is a neurologist, and I say this without fear of any contradiction whatsoever, having had personal experience that is one of the most dedicated medical practitioners that I've seen. Dr. Saab, I want to keep this discussion very simple and very basic, and ask questions which sometimes people feel that they don't want to ask. And having done some of the research for today's program, I came across another term in the world of medicine. It's called, and just correct me if the pronunciation is not correct, geriatrics. Is that correct?
Absolutely
now,
correct.
What is the difference between geriatrics and a person like yourself who's a neurologist?
So neurology deals with illnesses of the brain, the spinal cord, the nerves, the nerve muscle junction, the muscles, and any illness along those pathways which may affect those structures. And geriatricians also deal with illnesses of the nervous system, but they have a special emphasis in that they deal specifically with older persons.
Okay. So they would see elderly people, whereas you would see people across the spectrum of age.
Correct. And we have adult neurologists, which is what I am, and then we have pediatric neurologists. And the other difference is that geriatricians traditionally are trained as physicians who deal with the aspects of an older person's care from a general medicine point of view. I'm not specifically focusing on neurology as such, whereas neurologists would deal specifically
confined to that. All right, thank you so much for that. Then what's the difference between Alzheimer and dementia?
So dementia is a term that's applied to a person who has got two characteristic features. The one is that there's cognitive fallout. So by cognitive fallout, a person is not in full command of their faculties. And
so you're talking about mental faculties?
Mental faculties. And secondly, a person has an inability for self-care. So those two criteria need to be met in order for a person to be classified as having a dementia. Alzheimer's disease is one cause of dementia, first described by Alois Alzheimer in 1909 in his patient who was 51 years old and who displayed the signs of cognitive dysfunction together with an inability of self-care. So when you lose cognitive function and you don't have the ability to care for yourself, then we would say that you have a dementia. Depending upon the cause, it may well be Alzheimer's disease, it may well be vascular dementia, it may be frontotemporal dementia, it may be a dementia associated with Parkinson's disease. Depending upon the cause, then we would say you have a dementia of a specific type. Having said that,
Alzheimer is a type of dementia.
Correct.
Okay, all right. You were saying?
And because of the bias in terms of the classification and the diagnostic criteria, the vast majority of patients, in fact, end up as being classified as having dementia of the Alzheimer type.
Okay.
So, and that has now become the commonest type of dementia, but it's just one type.
I understand. Thank you so much for that. And then the third type of disease or condition that I'd like to hone in a bit today is Parkinson's. Where does that fit into the picture?
So like dementia, which is a neurodegenerative illness, by that I mean neuro referring to the nervous system,
yes,
and degenerative meaning that the nervous system is busy dying. Like dementia, Parkinson's disease is also a neurodegenerative illness. Unlike dementia of the Alzheimer type, Parkinson's disease, apart from patients developing a dementia later on in the disease, also have characteristic symptoms. And the four characteristic symptoms that patients with Parkinson's disease have are firstly slowness of movement.
Okay.
It's very difficult to move quickly. And we call that in medical terms brady, meaning slow, kinesia, meaning movement.
Okay.
So bradykinesia. And then patients with Parkinson's disease also have rigidity. In other words, they have stiffness.
Okay.
And then the one thing that most people know about in terms of Parkinson's disease is that people have a tremor. And then the last thing that patients with Parkinson's disease...
tremor, shaking of the hands?
Pardon, yes.
Okay.
So a shakiness of the hands, a rhythmic shakiness of the hands, and typically that tremor is found what we call at rest. And it's often called a pearl rolling or a money counting tremor.
Okay.
And the last characteristic of Parkinson's disease is that patients have instability of posture. That typically occurs later on in the illness. And the International Movement Disorder Society says that you need 2 out of those 4 characteristics, the bradykinesia, the rigidity, the tremor, and the postural instability, 2 out of those 4 in order to make a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, which was wonderfully elucidated by James Parkinson in his essay in the Lancet in the early 1800s, which he titled An Essay on the Shaking Palsy. And he described, and you know, we Indians, so he described 4 sailors on the East India docks in London who had these symptoms.
Okay, so it's people like Muhammad Ali, that's one of the celebrated cases of Parkinson's.
Sure.
I've also read that Pope John Paul had Parkinson's, and so did George Bush and Margaret Thatcher. So there have been cases of celebrities also having Parkinson's.
Well, the most famous one I know is Michael J. Fox.
Okay,
And,
I didn't know that.
And he's recently, he's authored a book and it's just been published. And he's now had the illness for 30 years. And he makes the wonderful point, which I always make to my patients when we make the diagnosis, because it's very frightening, that you won't die of Parkinson's disease. You'll die with Parkinson's disease, because it's a slow, progressive illness.
Okay. Then, Dr. Saad, what brings about this condition?
Parkinson's disease or dementia of the Alzheimer type?
Dementia, Alzheimer, and Parkinson's.
Okay, so broadly speaking, these are neurodegenerative illnesses in which the brain or the cells in the brain are slowly dying.
Now, why do they die?
So we don't know the exact answer to that.
Okay.
But this is what we think is happening in a nutshell. If you think about a cell that, for example, in Parkinson's disease, the cells that are particularly affected are in a part of the brain which we call the substantia nigra. Now this is in a part of the brain called the midbrain. So if you can just imagine, here's my brain, it starts here and it ends somewhere around here. And the mid portion of the brain is called the midbrain. And if you have to do a post-mortem on me today and you slice open my brain at that level, you'll find a darkly pigmented stripe of cells. And because it's darkly pigmented, it's called the substantia nigra. Now, there's millions of those cells in the substantia nigra. And the reason why they're darkly pigmented is because they produce a chemical which talks to other cells. And the name of that chemical is called dopamine. And that's what we call a neurotransmitter. It transmits messages. And you know, it's an ajib thing, subhanAllah, that each one of those dopamine producing cells has got 5,000 nerve endings.
Wow.
And they project vastly from the midbrain all over. I don't think Pep Stores has got 5,000 branches in South Africa. You know, so now this is a factory. It's producing, it's making a product, and the product it's making is called dopamine. And because it's a factory, you get raw materials that come into the factory. You get a process which is applied to those raw materials to produce that chemical, and then you've got a transportation network which has to deliver it to 5,000 sites. And as you know, that in any process, in any factory, there's always a waste product that occurs.
Okay.
And we think what happens is that these waste products cannot be normally excreted from the cell. And so they accumulate inside the cell until they accumulate to such a point where they overwhelm the cellular machinery.
Okay, yes.
And they cause the cell to unfortunately then demise. And so now you have one less dopamine producing cell. And so it goes on. And eventually there comes a critical point at which you don't produce enough dopamine, which gives rise to the characteristic symptoms of Parkinson's disease. In dementia, on the other hand, of the Alzheimer type, what happens there is that you get accumulation of abnormal proteins which we call beta amyloid and tau. And those accumulate inside cells and sometimes outside cells, and they disrupt the cell and cause it to die. In vascular dementia, which is dementia where you get multiple strokes, there the mechanism is multiple strokes caused by blockages of blood vessels, or alternatively tiny hemorrhages, result in patients losing nerve cells, and as a consequence they lose cognitive faculties.
Okay. Is there a cure for these conditions?
Unfortunately not.
There is no cure for it.
Not
so
yet.
One needs to manage it.
One needs to manage it.
Okay. Dr. Saab, what special needs should be taken into account by a family if there is a family member who has any one of these conditions? For example, I'm particularly now referring to maybe a bathroom with a shower setup, items like grab rails to help people who have instability problems and so on.
Okay, so there's the physical side of things that need to be very taken care of. But perhaps I can take it one step back.
Okay.
In a person who has a dementia, that person has lost their cognitive faculty. So they will repeatedly ask the same questions over and over again. They will ask you, what is your name? What is the day? What are you doing here? Who are you? Why have you come? You may answer these questions once, and then 2 minutes later they'll ask you exactly the same questions over and over and over again. It's like a self-playing record. It requires a lot of sabr and a lot of patience on the part of the family to entertain that. Then they don't have any, because they don't have any episodic memory, they won't remember whether they've eaten or not. They won't remember whether they've taken their tablets or not. Often they will eat the same meal like breakfast 3 or 4 times unless they're supervised. They may overdose on their medications. Because they have loss of their cognitive faculties, they may not recognize names of people and things. Because they have loss of cognition, they may not recognize faces. Because they have loss of cognitive faculties, they may, for example, mistake a child for a parent, their parent. And because they don't have control of their faculties, they may become behaviorally very, very disturbed, to the point where they become aggressive, to the point where they may become violent, or to the point where they display no judgment and no insight in terms of how to conduct their affairs, where they become completely trusting of strangers who may take complete advantage of them. They also neglect self-care, so they may not want to go in bath. If you tell them to go in bath, they may become quite stubborn and obstreperous. They may put their dirty clothes back into the cupboard. They may soil themselves without actually recognizing that there's something wrong here. So getting them to the bathroom requires an establishment of a routine. And if you manage patients with a routine, generally that makes it easier for caregivers in order to avoid caregiver fatigue. In the bathroom, because generally these are frail and feeble and elderly persons, it usually requires that the family, usually with one or two people, monitor them. You cannot leave people alone there. And you have to make sure that the ablutions and what is required is done so that you can't expect a person who has a dementia to be able to wash properly, to be able to dry themselves properly, to be able to dress properly. They will require almost complete supervision. As the Quran says, as we get older, we become more and more childlike.
Very true. I think that's Surah Yasin. Surah Yasin. Dr. Saab, and then for people with this type of condition, would you recommend any special dietary requirements?
Not in particular. People have spoken about the use of the omegas. People have spoken about the use of vitamin supplements. And these may be useful things. But a balanced, healthy diet, especially rich in fish, rich in vegetables, rich in vitamins, is to be recommended. More importantly, the person should not be neglected to the point where nobody cares about whether they've eaten or not. Because we have seen those stories, unfortunately.
And then family support structure?
The most important thing to recognize is that you cannot expect one person to do this on their own. And frequently what happens is that it falls on the lot of one child, usually a daughter, who's expected to care for elderly parents because it's just expected. Sometimes it falls on the lot of the child in whom or with whom the parents are living with, and the other siblings are nowhere to be found or may offer very little emotional support, unfortunately. The best thing to do is to recognize that when mom or dad is sick, to make sure that in order to avoid caregiver fatigue, you take it in turns to look after mom and dad, preferably in the environment they are most accustomed to. And that requires some sacrifice. The second thing is to recognize that you must care about someone, but you don't necessarily have to always physically care for someone. There's a vast difference between the two.
Would you like to elaborate a bit on that?
About and for. So, to care about someone means that you always have their best welfare at heart.
Okay.
You know, to physically care for someone means that you have to make sure that they're bathed, they're fed, that they're going to be sleeping, that they're going to be eating, that they're going to be exercised, that they are comfortable. You can't physically do that all the time as a single person. That often leads to complete burnout. And it's important that you have a team of people who do that. It's also important that because you take it in turns, if it's not your weekend to be on, you take the time to rest and recharge your batteries. You take the time to recuperate, to look after mom or dad the next week or the week thereafter. It's important that you do that. Otherwise, it leads to enormous levels of frustration. And that will result in poor care for the patient.
I see.
And if I may, Mr. Parker.
Sure.
You know, it not only does it go to weekends. I say to families, you know, and I'm sorry I have to use the word, but I say to them, please, let's all play nice. You know, because what happens is that when you don't play nice, then, you know, you don't get your holidays, and then it becomes resentful. And then children who come from the same womb end up fighting with each other. And often then mom and dad are often put into placement, and that becomes hugely problematic. You know, as a community, the moment we forget how to look after our most vulnerable is when we have lost our way.
Absolutely. Dr. Saab, when the publicity went out for today's interview, one person contacted me. She's 35 years old, and she said she starts forgetting. Please ask Dr. Amin Is that a sign of Alzheimer?
Definitely not.
Definitely not.
Definitely.
Okay.
Not. You know, if you are forgetful, all of us will forget things from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
The important thing to recognize is that attention is the gatekeeper to memory. If you fail to pay attention, then what tends to happen is that you are going to forget. And, you know, we live such busy lives. You know, this sister of ours, I'm sure, has got a family with children, and, you know, she's got so many responsibilities that I'm sure there are so many competing things that she's going to find it that every now and then she forgets something. As long as she recalls them later on, that's okay. It's normal to forget from time to time. That's okay.
Is it also normal to not remember something that happened yesterday, but remember something that happened 30 years ago?
So in dementia of the Alzheimer type, that's the classical pattern of memory loss.
Okay.
So the law that is used to describe this is named after the neurologist who first described it. He was a French neurologist called Ribot. Okay. And Ribot's law says that episodic memories of what happened, for example, during this conversation of ours, would be forgotten. But what happened 30 years ago would be very well remembered.
Okay.
So memories that were laid down long ago will always be retrieved. And you'll see, as the disease progresses, the person becomes a young adult and then a teenager and so on. Okay. You know, and you can sort of judge where you are in terms of the progression of the illness as to at what stage are the people actually, you know, recalling memories from. So the answer to the question is no, it's not a sign that you've got Alzheimer's disease. Far from it. It's probably just normal everyday forgetfulness because of inattention.
Okay.
If the memory is such that it's permanent and you cannot remember anything at all, then that's a different story.
Okay.
And if you lose the ability for self-care, then that's a different story.
Okay. And then I think a very important question, it may sound like a bit of a morbid question, is how long does one live after being diagnosed?
So that's also a wonderful question. And on average, if you have dementia of the Alzheimer type diagnosed, then from the time that the diagnosis is made, on average, it will take about 7 years before you will require full-time nursing care, on average. But it's highly variable. Okay. In some, you know, we have a body of literature that describes rapidly progressive dementia. We know that certainly in vascular dementia, the progression may be a bit faster as well.
Gee.
But, you know, it's variable, but for dementia of the Alzheimer type, you know, you've got about 7 years before a person will require full-time nursing home kind of care.
Okay. Dr. Saab, a lot of people that you and I know have gone into retirement and are leading a life which is completely the opposite to what it was when they were in employment. The importance of keeping the brain active.
A wonderful question. You know, it's brain gym.
Brain gym.
So just like you would physically exercise, you know, you have to mentally exercise. So crossword puzzles, memory games, Sudoku, play chess if you want to, and exercise your mind by reading, by recalling, by doing all of those things, and by socially interacting. That keeps you young. You know, if we talk about the risk factors for dementia, there's lots of risk factors we can talk about. We can speak, for example, about environmental risk factors. Yes. We can talk about pollution. We can talk about genes. We can talk about the risk factors for the development of vascular disease. But the most important thing to remember is that a lot of these risk factors, you can't do anything about your genes, but you can do something about exercise. You can do something about being physically active, and that will keep you mentally active as well. And if you have a social network, then you must utilize it. You know, the ability to visit, or in COVID times it's a bit difficult, but the ability to visit relatives, the ability to interact with people, all of that is a huge cognitive activity which exercises your brain. We don't think about it that way.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's why I felt I had to pose that question. And then finally, Dr. Uzair Amin, the importance of family support structure during this very challenging times for an elderly person.
Very important. If you create a loving, safe, homely environment, then you will be able to nurture that person for a very long time to come. And importantly, the insights that you will glean from that person, even though they may have a dementia, will be truly remarkable. I've seen it. Some of the wisest things that have been said to me as a doctor and as a neurologist have been from my patients with dementia, who've taught me the most wonderful things.
They've taught you?
They've given me such pearls of wisdom as to how to live, that you have to be eternally grateful.
So you are saying, in conclusion, that whether it is dementia, Alzheimer, Parkinson's, it is manageable.
Absolutely. There's good therapy available, which is not curative, but which may manage the behavioral disturbances. There's good therapy available, which will certainly help for the memory. There's good therapy available, which will reduce the incidence of vascular risk factors, which often perpetuates and worsens dementia. All of those things are critically important to implement together with routine, good physical activity, and creating a nurturing environment. The person who has the illness, when they say something that may be hurtful to a family member, you have to recognize that that's the illness talking, it's not the person talking. When things are said that sound offensive, one has to just remember that it's the illness. And one has to remember that the person that you are looking after, that person sacrificed very often their entire life so that you can have the life that you have.
Absolutely, mashallah.
And it's not so much payback time. There's no such thing. This is our duty as Muslims to make sure that those who are the most vulnerable are the most cared for. This was the great sunnah of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Dr. Uzair Amin, on that most beautiful note, I really want to thank you. You've come out from your practice, you spent a half an hour here, and you've given us, for me, it is an ocean of knowledge that you have on this particular subject matter, and especially because it concerns the elderly and the aged. It means so much to each and every one of us, and I really want to thank you very much, and may Almighty Allah continue to reward you and place lots of barakah and happiness in your lives. Shukran so much. It's really an honor and a pleasure to have you here.
Jazakallah khair for having me. It's such a great honor to be here at Masjidul Quds. This is like my home masjid. I work less than 2 minutes away, walk from here. And this masjid is very close to my heart. And some of my best friends, just remembering them now, they're not around, they bring tears to my eyes, Mr. Gangrikar, as you know, what a legend.
Absolutely.
Dr. Luah Bade, what a man.
Absolutely.
Sheikh Fuad Isaacs, what a man. And
Ya Allah.
Mr. Badruddin, these were, and Dr. Jaffa, I mean, these were just, such wonderful examples of people who, even, in their old age, made such huge sacrifices for the community. And Allah fill their covers with nur and grant them the Jannah, inshallah.
Ameen. And Allah continue to reward you, inshallah, as well. Shukran so much. Dr. Uzair Amin, speaking to us with the vast knowledge that he has about the conditions of Alzheimer, dementia, Parkinson's, and basically just empowering us in terms of how we must relate to people who are suffering from these conditions. And I just want to take a second or two of the program just to offer a special prayer, very silently, a special prayer for all those who are suffering from this condition. May Almighty Allah make it easy for them, inshallah. After the break, an amazing young man who fought against all odds, including depression, and became an award-winning business personality.
تذكر يوما كنت تعانق دمعة الفكر تناجي الله في صبر وترجو رحمة تسري فعاش القلب إخلاصا وصرت تحوم كالطير تحلق في ثقافات وتنهل من ربى الخير ترى ما زلت تذكرها وتذكر روعة
Welcome back to the second session of Sunday Forum, coming to you from the studios based here at the Quds Broadcast Center, Cape Town, South Africa. What a very important and insightful session we had earlier on with Dr. Uzair Amin, talking to us about Alzheimer, dementia and Parkinson's, unfortunately diseases which inflict more the elderly than the young people. So now we take the focus off from the elderly people and put it onto an amazing young man. And by way of introduction, it's been the worst period in the history of humankind. But the human spirit is absolutely amazing. That spirit is personified in triumph over adversity. And therefore, we need to put the focus on the upliftment of the human spirit. And that's why we bring you this amazing story today. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome to the studios Shakil Kajika. Assalamu alaikum and welcome.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you doing?
I'm doing very well today.
Thank you. Shakil, let me start by making a very broad statement. Being a relatively young man, you had dreams and aspirations. What were they all about? Maybe in the space of a minute or two.
I still have plenty of dreams and plenty of aspirations. So alhamdulillah, my life has been such a way that I've been able to tick off a lot of my goals that I had for myself 18 years ago when I started my business. And amongst those dreams was to have this business that would impact my community. And I've realized that dream in such a wonderful way. Other dreams, traveling, having different types of experiences.
What are your hobbies like?
My hobbies is surfing and running.
Okay.
And cycling as well.
Okay.
I love doing all three of those things, and I do it fervently and quite often.
I know my children and a lot of their friends are very much into cycling and very much into running, but surfing is something not that usual, so that is an unusual angle to the life of Shakil Kajika. Shakil, you went through a period of difficulty in your life. Without being too personal, would you be able to elaborate to give some context to our discussion today?
Absolutely. So, considering the topic, rising strong from depression to champion, and I want to give context to that topic. So, even though it seems as if from the outside my life is this perfect life, there has been times in my life where I have suffered from depression.
Okay.
And I have gone through depression and severe feelings of sadness over different periods of my life. And I think the aspect of being able to rise above those things and managing it is a very important message that we need to spread out to the public, because
how did you manage to do that? Was it something that you read about, or something that just came your way, or something that you felt you should do something about?
Yeah, so being us men, we don't like to admit when there's something wrong. We are all alpha males. And if you think about having men in a classroom or in, I take this Tuesday morning women's forum, if Sheikh Alexander asks him a question, you'll have a whole lot of women answering with their hands up. You ask a man a question, he doesn't want to raise his hand.
Okay.
He's very shy.
Okay.
He doesn't like to be vulnerable. So for me, I realized it very late in my life that I had depression. I didn't know what I was experiencing, why I was experiencing these feelings inside. Everything seemed perfect on the outside, but inside it wasn't that rosy.
Did somebody bring it to your notice, or did you just happen to find out yourself?
No, I didn't find out myself. Alhamdulillah, somebody brought it to my attention, which is usually your wife. But being the stubborn person I was, I didn't want to listen to her.
Okay.
And on my journey of being a businessman, I was guided to by my mentor, and he taught me you must have 4 things if you want to be a proper entrepreneur: a therapist, a trustworthy accountant, a lawyer, and a mentor. So you must have those 4 things.
4 in 1?
No, not 4 in 1. 4 individual specialists.
Okay.
The therapist as an entrepreneur is very important. So I had a therapist, and then she saw my patterns of behavior and realized that, Shakil, you know what you're talking about here? Your symptoms is alluding to depression. And then everything made sense to me.
Okay. So it was that person that actually was the source of triggering off the awareness for you.
Yes.
Okay. What was that point in your life, Shakil, when you felt there is something more in life than just what is happening around you? The turning point.
Yeah, there was various turning points, but I was very blind to it. And the turning point is always when you lose the thing you love the most. That's the turning point. And so for me, I experienced a lot of loss in my life. And I think when I lost my grandmother, that was really a big turning point for me.
Okay.
Being at a very low and then having to face the feelings, which I really hated doing.
Okay. Was that your turning point?
I would say that was the turning point. Yeah.
Any other major events that took place which also, you know, brought about this turnaround?
Yeah, there's lots. I don't want to get into the details of it.
It's fine.
But life,
no problem
experience and human experience, life will test you the most. And it doesn't matter on what level in life you are. You can be the #1 entrepreneur in the world. You can be the guy that is living in the township. The tests are the same. So, and I think that in the tests, if we have the wrong way of looking at the test, then that is when we really suffer.
Let me mention to you that I've actually read on a few very famous business personalities and even other famous celebrities. And in as much as they seem to have millions of people around them, they're very lonely people. They are very, very lonely people. And this is why I'm probing you, because sometimes it appears as if, you know, there's one picture from the outside and a completely different picture from the
That's
inside.
an excellent point to raise, because it needs to be made known that, again, I will say as men, because it's more prominent amongst males and females, we want to show the best picture. We want to mask our true feelings. So we go out and we act strong, but at night when we come home, then we're shouting in our pillows, or we act out with the family, with our kids, wife, etc., etc.
So it's basically a life of pretense.
Yes.
Life of pretense. Shakil, then you started your business and had a mission of impact over profit. I want you to elaborate on that.
Yeah.
Impact over profit.
Yes. I'll take it another step further.
Okay.
Community over competition. It didn't happen in my first period of business. For the first 10 years of my business, I struggled a lot. I was grinding, I was working in my business, I was putting in long hours without receiving the financial benefit for that hours, until I met the right people that taught me the right ways of doing things. And getting to know these people and being taught these things, they taught me that impact is a better way to go than profit. Because with impact, you're going to develop loyal customers. With profiteering, you might get repeat customers, but they might not be loyal customers.
Okay. Okay. So that's basically where you came up with that, with that phrase of impact over profit. And then you established an NPO called Crafting Heroes.
Yeah.
What is that all about?
So, in my business, one of the departments I have is called the Knitting and Crochet Lounge. And here we sell a whole lot of different knitting yarns. Now, I know Uncle Sattar can relate to that, because I'm sure Uncle Sattar's wife or sisters or aunties, they used to knit. Today, people don't knit as much. So, Crafting Heroes, I established as NPO because a lot of the ladies would come in and buy wool for charity. And then they would take it to their church, to their masjid, to their organization, the library, and distribute it. And I thought to myself, we've got this hub here of ladies coming. Why don't we become a distribution center? That was one point. The second point was the new generation, they're losing the art of these craft skills and hand skills, which is really so valuable.
Very true.
And I could see how these women were also making knitting to sell, and there's such a great need for employment in the communities. And I thought, why don't we ask these ladies to teach the ones that's willing to learn, and then they can use the skill and sustain themselves. So that's how Crafting Heroes came together. We have workshops, and we have the experienced ladies teaching the younger ladies, and even kids. Mothers come with their children to teach them to knit.
So that's why you've used the word Crafting Heroes.
Yes.
Okay. Now, during this period, the whole question of depression, did it still impact on you, or did you feel that you were slowly getting out of it because of the new interest and the new impetus you had in your life?
Yeah, so I think what we need to understand with depression is not just something that goes away. It's something that you will be with you, and you have to learn to manage it. So on the onset of COVID, I was very sad because we're going to have to close our business. We don't know what the future is going to look like. We have 22 staff members. They have families. They calling me, what's happening? I'm sure the business people in the community can relate to that.
The stakes were very high.
Yeah, so I did get sad, but not depressed about it.
Okay.
Because in business, I'm very resourceful. And I knew that I just needed time to let it sink in and just allow the feelings to settle and then put my mind to it.
So Shakil, would you say that your business aspirations, to some extent, I'm not saying to the full extent, but to some extent, took you out of that period of depression?
No, definitely not. Because sometimes your business can be a source of depression.
Okay. Depending on how it goes.
Depending on how it goes, yeah.
Okay.
And business fluctuates. It's not always good, or it might be very good and then it goes down. You have staff issues. It all impacts on your stress levels,
And
your
it can
anxiety.
trigger.
It can trigger. You don't know how to deal with situations, and that's where the depression starts coming over you. That's why you need a therapist.
Okay, now it's all making sense to me now. And then Shakil, during the time of the lockdown, you also went into the manufacturing of face masks.
Yes.
Maybe just some
So to
elaboration.
avoid any unemployment, number one, and to avoid loss of income to the families, to the staff that's working, and obviously to the family, immediately once the hard lockdown was over, we converted our workroom, because one of our departments is the interior decor showroom. In the interior decor showroom, we make custom-made curtains and we do upholstery, cushions, etc., etc. So it was set up for that. We converted the whole setup into a mask-making production room. And that proved very, very good for everybody because they could come back immediately. They didn't have the stress of where they're going to get income from or what's going to happen to them. And it helped as well. At the same time, because the demand for masks was so high, and I have this business platform and a huge, quite extensive network, I then asked other ladies that was in the community, bring me your mask and we'll sell it at the shop, and then I advertised on their behalf. And
so you spread out the tentacles, so to say.
Yeah, just to help everybody, because we were all in it together.
And then, Shakil, you took your business aspirations to another level when you founded what is called aspiring startups.
Yeah.
Amazing, but if you can elaborate a bit.
Yes. So aspiring startup is my personal passion project.
Okay.
So alhamdulillah, being able to work on my business and not in my business, it gave me more time to do things that I like doing.
Can you repeat that? Not working on your business?
Yeah. So during the time of my business,
Yeah.
in the beginning I was working in my business.
Okay.
And then I got the tools and I was taught how to work on your business and not in your business.
Thank you. I understand now.
And working on my business freed up a lot of my time.
Right.
And that allowed me to work on things and do things that I really love doing. And one of my high values is community and giving back to the community by way of teaching them the skills that I didn't have in the beginning. So the idea is the first 2 years of your business is the most difficult 2 years. But after the 2 years, you actually realize how difficult it is, but then you're prepared for it. Your business, 80% chances of survival within the first 2 years. So the idea of aspiring startups is to give those entrepreneurs, those budding people that has these visions that want to start their own business, give them the tools to help them to get through that first 2 years.
So it's basically like the famous Chinese proverb, don't give them fish, but teach them how to fish.
Yes.
That's basically what it's all about.
It will always be like that, with crafting heroes as well.
Fantastic. An important question. Did you make any mistakes? And if so, how did you handle your mistakes?
Mistakes, let me say this. You make mistakes so that you can learn. You learn so that you can succeed. And you succeed so that you can help others. You are going to make mistakes. It's inevitable. It's part of the process. And one of the things that I learned recently, the bigger the mistake is not the bigger the failure. The bigger mistake is the bigger the learning that you're going to get from it. Everything in life is defines you in terms of the meaning that you give to it. So if you're going to see yourself as, I'm making mistakes and I'm such a failure, then you are unfortunately going to go that path. But if you realize that the mistakes is just there to teach you and to help you to become that amazing person that you're destined to be, then you're going to take that path.
So one could say that your mistakes are the school fees of your life.
Absolutely.
Eh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Shakil, and then I look at you, I look at Shakil Kajika, I listen to your story, I listen to the way that you've started up and all the NPOs and all the other institutions that you've developed, and then all of a sudden came this wonderful news for this young man who had a problem with depression, that your company was one of the top 20 finalists in the South African Small Business Awards competition. How did this come about?
Yeah, so how this came about is that most small businesses, they belong to organizations.
Yeah.
It's like a union. So the NSBC, the National Small Business Chapter of South Africa, they represent largely, or let me say, they represent most of South Africa's businesses. So we all register with them and we fall under the NSBC. Okay. What the NSBC provides for us is resources, teaching material, expertise, and things like that for entrepreneurs and businesses, especially incubation. Again, the first 2 years, which is the difficult period. So every year they have this award called the South African Small Business Awards, and they have a membership of, I mean, the whole of South Africa should be a member of this organization. So I'm sure it's in the millions. And every year, 100,000 or more people apply to become eligible as top 20 within.
Okay, that was going to be my next question.
Yeah, within the South African Small Business Awards. It's a very prestigious event, almost like Miss South Africa, but in the business world.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that I wasn't going to enter for this award.
Yes.
Because the information that they require, I'm not an admin person, I don't like writing mundane information and numbers. And I looked at the application, I'm like, oh no, this is going to take me a whole day, I'm not going to put it in. Yeah,
That's
so
not for you.
I emailed it to my ops manager and said, listen, what do you think about this? And she was like, I watch this every year, and Shakil, we must enter. I'm like, I'm not going to fill this out. You fill it out, please. And then she was like, yeah, okay, definitely. She filled it out. A week before the event, they sent me an email to say, listen, you didn't fill out the complete application form. It was only halfway done. It's like, okay, what must I still do? There was a whole entrepreneurial section that needed to be filled out. So I filled that out and submitted it. And then the next week when they announced, alhamdulillah, we were one of the top 20 in the country.
And you said that there were more than 100,000 applicants?
Yeah.
So you were in competition, so to say, with 100,000 people?
Yes.
And you came in the top 20?
Yes.
MashaAllah, Mubarak to you.
Shukran.
Well done, well done, well done.
Well done, well done to the team. I can't say that enough.
I can see, the smile brimming from ear to ear.
Yeah.
And I can understand and I can appreciate that. Then Shakil, it went one step higher than that. In addition to having won that award, you personally then won the South African National Entrepreneur Championship Award as well.
Yes.
How did that come about?
So once you're in the top 20, you become eligible within 4 main categories. And that 4 categories is Startup of the Year, Woman Entrepreneur of the Year, Championship Entrepreneur of the Year, and Champion Small Business of the Year. And so amongst the top 20, I was awarded as National Champion Entrepreneur.
How did they break the news to you?
It was a virtual event this year.
Okay.
Usually it's a gala event up in Pretoria, and everybody goes down there. It's a suit and tie thing. So I was a bit disappointed that I didn't have the opportunity to go there, just for the top 20 and experience it and network.
Sure.
But the software that they had was so amazing. It was as if you were at a live event. Tables, people sitting around, you can see each face.
Were you expecting to come maybe in the top 3?
No, not at all.
So
not at all.
When your name was announced, what was the feeling? Exhilaration?
Oh, the feeling was shock. I couldn't believe it because they had sub-awards leading up to the main awards, which was best retail business, tech business, financial. And then I thought we might stand a chance in the retail because that's our specialty. And when that was given to somebody, I was like, okay, I'll settle for top 20. So when that happened, I had 2 people on the side of me. One of my best friends and my wife was sitting next to me. They were jumping for joy and they were celebrating. The managers was jumping and I was just sitting like this. I actually cried after the award. I was just like, I couldn't believe it.
Alhamdulillah. Well done, well done. Mubarak to you, and as a member of the young people in our country, and I always say this, that the country depends on the youth to take the economy to a different level. Because that's going to be the saving grace for South Africa. We need to boost our economy.
Absolutely.
And it's people like you, the fervor, the passion that you have, and having come from this very unfortunate background that you had, and from a depression state to a state where you have won this wonderful award. It's absolutely amazing, and I really want to compliment you and the entire team around you. Just one final question, Shakil. Your advice, especially to the youth who feel sometimes down and under.
Okay, that's an excellent question. To the youth that's feeling down, I want to tell them, just come back to the depression. And I want to say that it's very difficult. It's extremely difficult that you are experiencing what you're experiencing and that you had to go through what you did. But just know that you do have it in you. You have the strength within you to overcome it. Depression is like a bully in your mind. It wants to tell you that you're not good enough. It wants to tell you that you're worthless. You lose your passion for things that you love. You want to stay inside your house. You want to keep your curtains closed. You just want to disappear from society. And don't let that bully overtake you. And what helped me a lot was I became aware of it. And then I learned about it. And lots of people, they just trudge through life thinking that there's something wrong with them. And look, there's nothing wrong. A person with disability, Allah created that person perfectly with that disability.
Alhamdulillah.
You can't tell that person there's something wrong with you. Somebody that has a mental illness, yes, we accept that we have this illness, but there is treatment for it. And it doesn't have to take you to a place where you become a non-entity to society. You can endure the feelings and then you can rise up. And I wanted to say some of the things that helped me was to understand what it means. My background, my family has a history of psychosis and schizophrenia in their background. So it might be that the level of serotonin and dopamine within my system is not that high as it's supposed to be. So taking a mood booster, vitamin B, being out in the sun, exercising, eating healthy, those things, making salah, gratitude is so important. You can't put a weight onto that or what the value. You can't put the value just on being grateful. And so it's going to be like a pendulum. You're going to go like this. But make sure, like the economy,
more ups and downs.
Yeah, there's more peaks and troughs, and that you can get through it.
Shakil, on behalf of all the viewers, once again, Mubarak to you. Well done, and we're mighty proud of you.
Shukran so much. Shukran.
That was Shakil Kajika, an amazing story of a man who was suffering from depression, came out of that, came through the pandemic, and of course he won 2 of these very prestigious awards in the world of business. Truly an amazing and an inspirational story. And on behalf of all the viewers, as well as the team here, we would like to say Mubarak to Shakil Kajika on that great achievement. He's certainly been a great source of motivation and inspiration, I'm sure, to many people who are watching. Before I go, let me just mention that on our next program, we have an absolute scoop. You'll see this book right in front here. This book is titled Disruption Amplified, and is written by one of the foremost scenario planners a man with a great intellectual capacity, Abdullah Varachia, who has kindly agreed to come on our program in 2 weeks' time, and he will be discussing the book. The host for that event will be Dr. Sahir Parker, and I can assure you that it's going to be a riveting 20 to 25 minutes. In this book, just to give you some indication of what the book is all about, he says, unlock key insights revealed in Disruption Amplified that will inspire your own rethinking during this remarkable and transformative time, and step boldly into a new tomorrow. I think it's a book that everybody should have, and everybody should read, and everybody should take heed of. So on our next program, we'll be absolutely privileged to have author Abdullah Varachia, who will be giving us a very deep insight into this wonderful book. Before we leave, once again, thanks to I just mentioned doctor, but it shouldn't be doctor, although he doctors all the technical side of things here. Thanks to Siraj Parker, Samir Parker, Anwar Umar Rumane, JJ Abdul Rahman, Ishtiaq Badruddin, and our young and amazing Hafiz Bilal Mahdi, who does the final editing for this program. Special thanks to all the participants on today's program. A note of appreciation to Rosies for the wonderful stage decor, and Nisa Gaibi for the artwork. Until we meet again in 2 weeks' time, from the entire team, we bid you Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
تذكر يوما كنت تعانق دمعة الفكر تناجي الله في صبر وترجو رحمة تسري فعاش القلب إخلاصا وصرت تحوم كالطير تحلق في ثقافات وتنهل من ربى الخير ترى ما زلت تذكر